Good afternoon, everyone. This is the think tank for the CalAPA. It is now 1 o'clock, so I am going to go ahead and begin. We are going to present some information with regard to the California standards for the teaching profession and coaching. And I am joined today by some folks who will be helping me with the presentation, and I will introduce them first. So again, welcome to this CalAPA think tank. This is going to be looking at understanding the California standards for the teaching profession and how to use them to guide coaching. So a couple of housekeeping items before we begin. We are utilizing Zoom, and I saw a thank you for using Zoom over WebEx, so thank you for that feedback. Just want to go over some basic features of Zoom if you have not already utilized the Zoom platform. Everyone should be on mute. I muted everyone upon entry into the think tank, so please make sure that you do have yourself on mute to cut down on background noise. We do have a raising hands feature, although we are going to be monitoring the chat. So any questions that may come up, please give us those ideas in the chat, and we will be monitoring that to ensure that we answer your question. We have disabled the ability to share screens by participants. Only the host is allowed to share screen. We will not be utilizing breakout rooms. But if you do have questions, as I said, please put those into the chat and we will be monitoring that. We will be recording this virtual think tank and we'll be posting that to our commission YouTube channel. I'm going to give you a little bit of information about where to find that. And finally, we do have the reaction feature in the participant list, so please feel free to utilize that if you hear something that you find to be helpful to your practice. So with that, what I'd like to do is have Amy Rising, who is our Director of Performance Assessment, go ahead and introduce herself and also introduce the other facilitators and co-facilitators. Amy, are you with us?
I am with you, James. Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Yes, Keith Myatt, it is Friday. I know these weeks are all kind of running together, but it is Friday. The sun is shining, and here we are together getting some good work done. So welcome to all of you. My name is Amy Rising. I'm the Director of Performance Assessment Development and Policy for the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. And I'll turn it over, well, I'll introduce them, but they can all say hi on their own. But Gay Roby, of course, is with us from the Professional Services Division, and James Webb, our consultant for performance assessments, is also here. So Gay, you want to say hi first, and then we'll turn it back to James. And then they, of course, will turn it over to our expert co-facilitator, Melissa Meetze-Hall.
Okie dokie. Hello, everyone. Nice to have you join us. And I'm sure it'll be a worthwhile hour for all of you.
And Gay, thank you. This is James Webb, and I'm a consultant with performance assessment. And I am very excited to be joined by Melissa. Melissa, could you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Oh, hi, everyone. This is Melissa. I feel like there's a lot of familiar names and faces out there. Look forward to just adding to the conversation and then letting us all pause and contribute to everyone's best thinking. So back at you, James.
Thank you. And this is our agenda. We will, after we've gone through our welcome and introduction, we do have some program announcements that we will begin with. And then our discussion for this month is specifically on understanding the California standards for the teaching profession and how it can support coaching with administrators and teachers with whom that they work. Then we will have time for some questions and comments, and then we will be closing our virtual think tank near the top of the hour at 2 o'clock. So Gay, would you like to go walk us through some of the announcements that we have here on this slide?
Thank you very much. For most of them, I feel like we're on hold.
Yes.
You'll see the faculty workshop that was originally scheduled for April in Rancho Cucamonga. Was that the city it was in? It was the
Yes.
San Bernardino Superintendent of Schools facility there. It has been postponed, and we're looking at maybe a midsummer, but we're still looking and not yet decided. Our coordinators meeting on June the 3rd will be held, but we have changed from face-to-face to an online setting, and that'll be from 8:30 to 12. And we have been registering for that. If you need information about where to register or if you're registered, please let myself or Lori Thornley know, and we'll let you know if you've already registered. And then our implementation conference was postponed from our June the 4th date, but we are considering putting that one online as well. Decision should be made quite soon, and we'll get information out. And then finally, yesterday, the commission took action to postpone our standard setting for next spring, so that we'll have sufficient numbers of submissions to set those standards.
Thank you, Gay. And I inadvertently left someone off to introduce herself. Lori Thornley from Evaluation Systems is also joining us. Lori, would you like to say hello?
That's okay, James. Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Okay, so another announcement that we have, we are now posting all think tanks as well as webinars that have utilized CalAPA resources and also CalTPA resources onto a playlist that we have with the Commission's YouTube channel. At the top, you'll see there is a bit.ly link for you to be able to access this. And when you do go to that web address, it will take you to the playlist for the CalAPA program and candidate supports. Right now, we currently have 5 webinars and think tanks that are available for you to view. As you can see, when I took the screenshot yesterday, 28 views. So gotta let you know, CalTPA is really winning on views. So we got to get the CalAPA views up. So help us be able to do that. Right now, with all of the supports that we have for program assessment, we are having the highest number of views on the YouTube channel. So again, we just put these here so that you can access them and know that they are available to help you, your program, and your candidates in assisting the navigating through this crisis with COVID-19. Here are some updates to the CalAPA submission schedule. Lori, did you just want to speak to some of the new dates that were added and what we're looking at here?
Sure. So we have added an extra date in July. Candidates that submit their cycles by July 2nd will receive score reports on July 23rd, and that will be for the current year 2 administration. Submission schedule for the 2021 administration will be coming out very soon, within the next day or two. And we will have submission dates for that administration starting in August.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lori. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to go into our content, which is going to be about coaching and CSTPs. Amy and Gay, if I could ask that you monitor the chat, and also Melissa will. And if there are questions that need an immediate answer, we could certainly take those as we're presenting, or if it would be easier, we might wait until the end. So whichever format you think is best, just let us know. And Melissa and I will be presenting throughout with our content. So I always like to begin these with a quote. It is the English teacher in me. And this quote is by Benjamin Disraeli, who was a prime minister during the time of Queen Victoria. And he says, "The greatest good you can do for another is not just to share your riches, but to reveal to him his own." And so I like to begin with this because really the best way when we think about coaching is to not just have our ability to share what it is that we know and what it is that we value, but to try to help a candidate reveal how he or she can learn the talents and the resources that he or she has to help them move practice forward. So what I'd like to do is start with an activity. And I want you to think about an effective coach that you have worked with or have seen, professionally or otherwise. Thinking about that. And in the chat, if you would, please take a few moments. And what qualities made that coach effective? What I'd like you to do is in the chat, identify what are those qualities that made that coach effective. And we'll monitor the chat and reveal those qualities that you found made the coach effective with someone that you've seen or maybe someone that you have worked with individually. Okay, I see one, accessible and personable. Supportive, good communicator, good listener. Again, another great listener. Listens. Listen to hear, not to speak. Non-judgmental. Specific and timely, actionable. Asked questions, great guide. Ability to meet where I was and challenge me to get where I needed to go. Built a relationship with me first. Again, another asking questions. Really good one here, trust. Problem solving. So excellent ideas here and the qualities that you're identifying. And I hope that you saw that in these, what ran throughout is that it wasn't about teaching. It wasn't about making you do something. It was all about building relationships. And hopefully when you, after the hour that you've been with us, you'll see this is what really effective coaching can be. So again, to frame our work together, I'm going to show you a video that you can find on YouTube, and it's called How Coaching Works. And what I'd like you to do is, as you watch the video, think about the ways in which the cartoon shows what it is to be a coach. And as you see things, type them into the chat and let us know what it is that you're seeing with regard to the video. Okay, so continuing on, I probably should have said that I realized that there was very little sound, but really the idea is that you don't need the sound because really you're watching the stick figures work. But a lot of the ideas that I saw were around supporting, scaffolding, helping the person to realize success, just-in-time learning, providing tools, one that just vision, thank you, Melissa, support when you fail, trust and encouragement to try again with new strategies. And so the idea here is giving you that really idea of around a cartoon and the purposes of looking at coaching as you are working with individuals. So now what I want us to do is take us to how the California standards for the teaching profession are structured and the way that they can be utilized to assist in coaching and mentoring. And so Melissa and I are going to provide some information. Melissa and I have presented quite a bit together. And so anytime Melissa will come in and provide some additional information, we will do it that way. So when the CSTPs were revised in 2009, and they are up for some further revision currently due to the COVID-19 situation. However, the CSTPs and the work group that will be facilitating that is on hold right now, but they, as soon as that travel resumes and meetings can resume, they will engage in their work with the CSTPs. One of the things that was very important is that as you are looking at the standards for the teaching profession, the idea is to give a model of what effective teachers are and what it is that they're able to do. And so one of the principles that came from the revision was that effective teachers are able to integrate the following ideas. The first one is that they have ethical concern for children and for society. Making sure that children are at the heart of everything that they do, the heart of lesson planning, knowing that what students bring to the classroom is just as important as the content. When I was an induction director, one of the things that I would often tell my new teachers is that if you look at the CSTPs, only 1/3 of the CSTPs really talk about content. The other 2/3 is all about kids, all about students and children. So that idea of concern for students and their well-being is so important. Number two, that they do have extensive subject matter competence. Competence doesn't mean mastery. It instead means, are you able to take what it is that you know and help make it accessible for children? And so when we think about subject matter, it is how to make what may seem to be something abstract, how to make it concrete. Also, effective teachers integrate thoughtfully selected pedagogical practices, meaning that the choices you make to teach are the ones that are going to best help kids and help them access material. And the other thing that an effective teacher integrates is the depth of knowledge about students, including knowledge of the child and adolescent strengths, understanding their individual strengths, interests, and needs, and knowledge about their families and communities to help make those connections between what is happening at home, what is happening out in the community, and how that can help them learn and help them understand and master content. Melissa, is there anything you want to add to this particular area when we think about the ways that the CSTPs were designed and put together?
Actually, James, I'm going to hope to bring those a little bit more to life on this next slide. And I'm going to dive in a little deeper on CSTP 2.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So as we're thinking about further, and this is where it's going to help you to work with your candidates and also with programs, especially around CalAPA Cycle 3. But the CSTPs were meant to provide a common language and vision of the scope and complexity of our profession. And so the idea is that when you look at the CSTPs, it does provide a common language that's based in objective research analysis of practice. And everything is always based in evidence. So as you look at the evidence that you see in a classroom, it is meant to guide teachers as they develop, refine, and extend their practice. So when we think about the CSTPs, notice that we're not seeing anything in here about evaluation. We're really looking at how a teacher can be led through the idea of reflection about student learning and his or her own teaching to help create professional goals to increase teaching, always in support of student learning. And finally, the CSTPs were meant to guide, monitor, and assess the progress of a teacher's practice towards professional goals. The reason that the CSTPs are at the heart of every induction program in California is that they are meant to serve as a guideline for creating habits of mind that all teachers will engage in as they continue through their career. So when we think about the CSTPs and the way that you work with candidates, or the way that candidates will work with their volunteer teachers, it's important for them to understand how the CSTPs are to be used. They really are a jumping off point to prompt reflection and to really help teachers refine and extend practice. So it's really good that you have that understanding as you go into the 6 domains of the particular domains of the CSTPs. So as you may be aware, there are 6 standards, and underneath each standard, there are sub-standards within each one of the CSTPs. The first one is engaging and supporting all students in learning. The second, creating and maintaining effective environments for student learning. The third, understanding and organizing subject matter for student understanding. The fourth, planning instruction and designing learning experience for all students. Number 5, assessing students for learning. And finally, 6, developing as a professional educator. One thing that's very important to understand about the CSTPs is they are not ranked that one is better than another or that one takes precedence over another. And in fact, it's quite the opposite. The way that the CSTPs are structured is that they do dovetail and that they work with each other, and one doesn't exist at the expense of another. So when we think about engaging and supporting all students in learning, we can all agree that you can only engage your students if you do have an effective environment for student learning. And as a result, you're planning instruction that supports that environment that then engages the students. So Melissa, I'm gonna let you, I believe this is where you wanted to add in.
Right. Perfect, James.
Yes.
Thank you. Absolutely. So just to build on that example, so James was actually connecting standard for the California Standard for the Teaching Profession 1 with Standard for the Teaching Profession 2. And when we look at, CSTP 2, I believe actually has 7 elements. And when I look at element 2.6, I'll just read that to you all. It's employing classroom routines, procedures, norms, and supports for positive behavior to ensure a climate in which all students can learn. So there's quite a bit there, and that's just one element of what our candidates, our admin candidates, may be asked to collect evidence about. So we can all imagine, and of course we have APA candidates on the webinar with us as well. So we can imagine being in a conversation with our volunteer teacher, and the volunteer teacher might broadly say, well, I want you to make sure, give me some feedback, if you will, about my environment. And they might have some further questions. Can you look for this, or for, they might have several ideas, or they may not. So for example, our APA candidate would want to look at the elements with the volunteer teacher. And one thing they might want to look at, they might want to look at the level, or how do students participate in the routines. For CSTP 1 and CSTP 2, there's a lot of evidence, again, kind of sticking on that, the fact that the candidate is going to be collecting evidence around these, this element. And in cycle, I'll speak for in cycle 3 of the CalAPA, we are asking them to look at just 1 or 2 elements for that observation. But back to my point, they are looking for the student behavior. So for this, again, element 2.6, we want them to be able to capture, we want our candidates to be able to collect evidence about how are the students participating in the routines or the procedures. How are they responding to the norms and the reinforcements? So even around this one element, we would collect evidence about the teacher's behavior, and certainly then the student's behavior in response to that. I think I'll leave it there right on that point. And then we'll bring that in. Again, we're going to now talk about coaching here in a bit specifically, and I'll go and revisit this item.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Melissa. And as Melissa said, when we think about the standards, this is the language, this is that common language about practice that we can utilize to have objective, evidence-based conversations. So now what we're going to do is we have provided our set of common language stems and ideas. So now what we're going to do is actually look at the feedback that we are able to then provide for the have great conversations with candidates. So I want to start with this particular quote from Laura Lipton, and it's called The Art of Feedback. One of the things that has happened in education is feedback has become almost of something that we dread or something that is considered to be negative. But actually, the only way that we can grow as educators and working with children and working with adults is by getting feedback and also delivering it in a way that it leads to growth. So to quote Laura Lipton, she says, "Feedback that leads to growth and improvement is data-driven, is based on shared definitions and understandings between parties, acts as a foundation for conversation, and sets goals and improves practice by naming strengths and gaps in relation to a clear set of standards." And those standards, of course, are the California Standards for the Teaching Profession. The best way to provide feedback is to have a common language and a common set of understandings and ideas that frame how our candidates can use that with their volunteer teachers. So what I'd like to do is, how do you provide feedback utilizing standards? So starting in the upper left, you want to build conversations that explore and improve practice. And when we say improve, we don't mean that there's ever a deficit. But as we all know in education, we can always think about ways that we can move practice forward to reach all of our learners. Maybe something that we didn't think about, something that was unknown to us, but an extra set of eyes could help reveal that to us. But again, it's not pointing out a deficiency, it's instead how to build upon a strength that may already be there. Conversations must be evidence-driven. Always collect evidence when it comes to classroom practice. And when we say evidence, we're talking about specific things that you observe in the classroom, such as number of hands raised, counting the number of hands. We want to avoid words such as some, most, or all, because they are what we would consider to be subjective terms that don't really capture the evidence that it is that's going to help build that conversation. And it's really good that we build conversations that are inquiry-based. Many of you in your first set of comments when I asked you to think about an effective mentor, you said that they asked questions, that they pushed you to think beyond your bounds. And really, that's what inquiry does. How can we ask questions and pose new ideas and ways of thinking that will help prompt the coaching of the individual? Going down, provide ongoing support through modeling and norming activities. How do you model effective instruction and norm what that might look like? Many times we try to provide feedback and it can be very, very abstract, because for some people, they may not have the tools that we have that we can provide. And going back to the video I had you watch, there were times when you had to pull things out of your toolbox to help the other person see what it is you were trying to have them form that ladder to where they could be and be successful. Another ongoing support is co-observations. We've utilized this before. One particular approach to this that I think is very effective is that of Cal State Fullerton. It's called whispered coaching, where you have someone teaching and you have another person alongside the person who's being coached, and they will help them to see things that are going on with the classroom that they may not have thought, because sometimes it's important to point out what those ideas are, and so you can do a co-observation together. Calibrations are very important to look at how you see yourself with the CSTPs, making sure that you're not allowing your own subjective ideas to come in with regard to what it is in terms of collecting evidence and analyzing that evidence, which could not just be the evidence that you collect during the observation, but also analysis when it comes to student work, and also what it is that you are thinking about when you look at assessments that help drive instruction. And then as we look at the right, whenever you are providing feedback with standards, you always want to relate the observation to the teacher's identified need or needs. This is why that conversation between the candidate and the volunteer teacher to help co-determine a set of standards to observe is so important. It's important that the teacher or the volunteer always has the buy-in so that the observation will be meaningful. Keep the focus on students when the teacher appears anxious. Whenever you think that the volunteer teacher could be getting some concern, always say, well, this is what I saw students do. Or when you made this comment or when you posed this question, here's how students reacted. Again, collect only evidence. Evidence allows it to be objective and keeps hopefully that subjective point out of it. And then, so important, sanction time for the post-observation reflection conversation. Whenever possible, it's always a good rule of thumb to review within 24 hours after making the observation so that it's meaningful and so that the person who's been observed can still have an idea about what it is that they did and also what it is that they can look forward to in reflecting on the observation. When we wait too long, a week, 2 weeks after the observation has occurred, the relevance and the meaning will lose itself in how many days that there is from when the observation happened and the conversation occurs. So what I'm going to do now,
James, can I
yes.
jump in? Sorry to interrupt you, but we did have a question around a point you were making on a little earlier in the earlier bullets on this slide. And it was from Carmen. So Carmen, if I get this wrong, just go ahead and unmute and help us understand your question. She says, can we have any literature on that, whisper coaching?
Sure. What I can do, oh, okay. It looks like Gay said she Googled it and found lots of information on whisper coaching. What I was going to suggest is that I was going to, while Melissa was presenting, get a web address that I could put into the chat. But yes, if you do enter whisper coaching into a search engine, you will get a lot of information, but I will get the specifics around the whisper coaching to you. And also there is a form that you can utilize when you are doing a whispered coaching co-observation format with a candidate or with a teacher. So excellent. Thank you so much, Amy. And now what I'm going to do is put forward to Melissa and let her talk to you about collecting evidence.
Thank you so much. So not everyone, as we can imagine, comes to us really with that skill set of collecting evidence. And they may even benefit from some practice of distinguishing between evidence versus opinion or fact versus opinion. So I have myself in my practice with candidates, I have found it helpful to actually start by collecting or practicing the statements of evidence. So what I generally do is I have some slides that has some different language, and I ask them to distinguish between fact, it comes down to fact versus opinion. So I have a table, if you will, and I have some statements, and very quickly they get to understand the difference between fact versus opinion and collecting that evidence. I throw in a few interesting pieces. I have a statement that I use, and this would be a quote out of a scripting, if you will. The teacher called on Jane and Wah unexpectedly. So I ask them to imagine if this were actually factually true, what might they really have in their notes? And what we decide upon usually is something like, when the teacher asks the question, the students, and whether they name the students or not, that's okay, responded by, and then they define whether they saw them turn their heads, look a certain way, or I mean, by that I mean a certain direction, but pretty quickly they understand how to capture evidence and not put in their opinions, if you will. The second thing that I then have them do is I actually take an element of a CSTP, and I tend to use CSTP1 or CSTP2, but that's just, you know, how I proceed in helping them understand the CSTPs. But what I do is I take an element and I ask them, and usually I have them do this in groups, but I ask them to define what they think it would look and sound like. And I do start with the look and sound like, so that they can get ready and start imagining what they might see in a classroom. So after they've done some listing, again, group work in my classes, after they've done some listing of what it would look and sound like, we then go into watching videos. So what you have on your screen on the left-hand side is something that doesn't really even need a form. We all know, I imagine, that we could even use lined paper, but I do provide this observation scripting record. And one thing that I do think that's important is I do ask them to indicate the goals up at the top. I want them to be in good practice, that, as Amy typed in, that extra set of eyes and extra set of ears. So I want them to be in good practice, that they're an extra set of eyes and ears towards a goal. So I just, again, I have them write that up as a reminder. We then practice just a simple scripting with the time, a T for teacher, S for student. We don't spend a lot of time, but I do go ahead and I show them some of my examples. After this, then I provide videos, and I'm going to watch the chat here. I have Carmen, I'm going to go, when I go to my next slide, I have an excellent source for videos. So I have them practice, and we all in the class, again, a lot of us are teaching in different types of settings, but have them all watch the first video together. And I really don't need, for this practice for them this time, I don't need more than 5 minutes. And not to discount anyone, but 5 minutes, much more than that when this is new, I just don't find that we need to go on and on for a full lesson. So they script, and then in partners, or it could be groups, but mostly I have them do it in partners. I have them look through their record to see and ensure that they have evidence, that they have not included any evaluative terms in this record. And of course, they're new. We reassure them you'll get better over time. They talk about observation fatigue for themselves, not knowing, just all those things that are as they're learning to observe. So we do this a few times. And I'll get you that source here again, as I said, after this slide. But I do ultimately allow and ask them to self-select a grade level or a content level, and then they go to this more independent practice. Okay, so before I go to the next slide, though, I want to talk with you about what I have on the right-hand side. So I have adapted, I have a sheet or a page per CSTP. And my intent on this was to help them stay focused on the language of the element. Now, again, I'm thinking about my CalAPA candidates. I'm thinking about my students in my admin master's classes. I want them to be specific and focused. And so what I've given, there's nothing fancy again to this other document that I created. It certainly, though, is a reminder you see down at the bottom that they need to capture the content-specific learning goal, and they need to make some reference. Even though the student work will be collected, I want them to make some reference in their notes about the student work. And then ultimately there at the broad base of the document is their reminder. They can, at this point, they might have some ideas of next steps and or resources that they might want to provide to their volunteer teacher. Okay, I'm going to look at the chat real fast. I saw some messages going through, and then we'll go to the next slide, but let's see what else. So it looks like some folks are wondering where some of those resources, but it looks like Amy is taking care of that for us. Okay, and then yes, you accurately collected that for me, Amy. We all watched that video first, 5 to 7 minutes, and then we go ahead and move on to some other examples. All right, so James, if you're still steering the videos for me, thank you. So I want to tell you about this source. I've used several sources. I've used the teaching channel in the past, but this is the source that I have used most recently. And the reason that I like this source, it is, number one, it's organized by grade span and content. And number two, they are, there's a full range of the teacher's practice. So these are, in many cases, by no means are the videos exemplars. I find that when there is a challenge, it's more engaging to our candidates, and it also stretches and grows our candidates when they're trying to make sense of what to put down when they're watching someone who you know, maybe there's a challenge there. It actually helps them, I believe. But there are many other good sources. So at this point, I think I'm going to hand it over to James for some processing, but then we do want to make sure that we talk about some coaching resources, and I know that we'll get to that. So back to you, James.
Thank you so much, Melissa. And so what we like to do is, as we start to bring these ideas to a close, is to have you think about this traffic light signal. One of the things that I used to do with my students in the classroom, and just to think about, you know, something that you will stop doing in teacher observations and or conferences. And, you know, we put that in the red, something with which you may feel that you need some additional information in the yellow, and then something that you are ready to try right away. And so what I would like folks to do for this particular activity is just think about what are some ideas that are coming up with regard to the green. What's something that you're maybe ready to try or have your candidates try with the information that Melissa and I have discussed. Hopefully a takeaway that you have from this virtual think tank that maybe you could utilize to assist your candidates with their work in cycle 3 of the CalAPA. And you can type those into the chat. Okay, I see use the observation template. Very good, yes. Model format. Check out the video sort resources for practice in class. Write evidence statements. Excellent. use the video resources. Yes, the video resources that Melissa shared are so important for candidates to see what it looks like in practice. Okay, so what I'm going to do, just so that we can honor everyone's time, is now bring it to questions and see what questions folks may have. Amy, would you like us to continue to use the chat, or do we want to? It looks like we have about 35 participants. We could have folks generate questions by unmuting themselves.
James, I'm happy to help you facilitate whatever is comfortable for you and Melissa. It seems to be working for putting questions in the chat, and then of course that gives us a record. But people can unmute and ask their questions as well.
Well, the one question I have is, what recommendations in reference to CSTPs might you have for online learning? What we've been thinking about is, I think it's particularly standard 2, and looking at, for cycle 3, the issue of well-being, and finding an element and creating an environment that matches that standard or matches the description of well-being based on the cycle 3, which is, I guess, they're healthy, they're happy, and comfortable, something like that. So again, what recommendations for CSTPs for online learning?
Right. Melissa, if you're okay, I'll start, and then please feel free to chime in. Cheryl, you're absolutely correct. This was Cheryl, correct? I just want to make sure I'm addressing the right person. You're absolutely correct. CSTP2 does actually have a word in it. I believe it's CSTP 2.1, where it says actual or virtual learning environments. But what I would also recommend is taking it a little bit further, looking at CSTP5, assessing students for learning. When I was induction director, we had a teacher, an induction candidate who was in complete online hybrid, well, it was online and in some cases hybrid learning with virtual formats. And one of the things that his mentor really assisted him with was looking at CSTP5 and assessing students for learning in terms of providing that feedback and also involving families with regard to feedback around how students were doing, and involving them in the way that they provided timely feedback and comprehensible feedback to the students and their families with regard to how things were progressing. And so CSTP5 tended to be a piece that really needed that assistance, because sometimes what can happen in a virtual online environment is that a lot of work can be collected, but then it's not being assessed. Or when a teacher may be providing instruction through whichever platform, Zoom or Google Hangout or whatever he or she has, that how do they adequately provide both formal and informal feedback to the students to help them with those mastery of standards and understanding. Melissa?
So, yeah, thank you, James.
Yeah.
So Cheryl, I'm actually also looking at the content expectations and thinking about the CAPE. So you're absolutely right. It's that student-centered learning and well-being portion, and that our candidates are expected to understand that that school success includes both, the evidence of their academic and their well-being. So I think I appreciate that question, spot on. I think that one area would be CSTP 2.1. And I think the evidence, if we think about what the students in that healthy environment, what the students are doing. So an online or face-to-face environment, we should see students being able to demonstrate the efforts of being positive, being accepting and respectful of differences. And at a high level of implementation in the classroom, we would see, or online classroom, we would see students taking responsibility to, for example, resolve conflicts, students promoting respect. So if we were helping someone explore and examine the well-being of their class and their students, we could look at some of that evidence. Again, the student role in and feeling part of that classroom environment, I think could give us evidence about that. That would be a starting point where I would go.
Right. And I think another one, Melissa, to that point, is really also looking at, I think, CSTP 4, and really thinking about how are you designing lessons and the learning experiences using the online format. So again, those are, ideas that could be, explored as well.
So, sorry, James, Cheryl, I want to add something also. In online learning, we talk a lot about engagement, and engagement in online is different. There are some resources. Most of the resources that I would reference are books, so I'm not quite sure that that's what's called for everyone right now. But when we think about engaging online, there is a dimension that we as the educator, we need to consider our social self and our professional self, so that we can make those connections. And it's not so much that we would spend more time in the affect, and it's not so much that we would spend more time in an anticipatory set if we had one, but it is that we're acknowledging that I do need to pay attention to those affects and that engagement, in this different format. So maybe it's first and foremost pushing the pause button to be a careful watcher of behaviors.
Right.
And eliciting.
So Melissa, you talked about resources. So what we wanted to also share with you, as I'm thinking of it, to make sure that we get to this, is Melissa and I thought of some resources that could help you as you go back to your programs, and also for working with your candidates. And here are 4 particular areas of works that are seen as the kind of like the baseline and the guide for mentoring and coaching. The first one by Arthur Costa and Robert Garmston, Cognitive Coaching, is really the guide for mentoring and coaching. A lot of programs utilize this particular book. Elena Aguilar, if you're familiar with her work, she has 2 books, one called The Art of Coaching and another one that's called Onward Building Resilience. And Elena Aguilar really talks a lot about transformational coaching to improve student outcomes and really promoting equity. She is both a teacher and an administrative coach in the Oakland area. She also has a blog that you can subscribe to, and she updates it every day with information. So, and I'm thinking that, there's a lot of information about online learning that she probably would be providing. Jennifer Abrams, Having Difficult Conversations. Jennifer Abrams is out of Palo Alto. Again, another really strong voice when it comes to talking about practice. She really looks at challenging conversations to help move practice along. And then the last suggestion are the Laura Lipton and Bruce Wellman, Mentoring Matters, which is a very good resource for practical tips for mentoring and coaching. And I think, Melissa, you wanted to mention some other ideas with this as well.
Yes, so there's, I'm actually going to work from the bottom to the top on this. So Laura Lipton and Bruce Woman, they have this notion and present a notion of something that's called a third point. And the third point is that evidence, and that's why the evidence collection is so important, so that when we do have conversations, for example, if James and I were talking about my practice, he's using that evidence as the third point, as our discussion point. And if we were face to face, I usually hold my arm out about 3 feet, and there's that third point. It's out there. That's what we're going to talk about. For Elena Aguilar, she and Costa and Garmston's book has been updated. So she does of course talk about coaching skills, listening and questioning, but she does have, I think, 2 chapters which get into directive, and not that we think people need to go there, but it is nice that that resource is there a little bit when we do need to help someone see or provide some corrective. And then, of course, on Costa and Garmston, very much mediator skills, trust, of course, being huge, as James brought up, and very much the idea that we're going to mentally rehearse how to have these conversations. And then the last book that I am now starting to use is called Coaching Redefined, and it is by Sherry St. Clair. And what I'm really liking about that book is it is allowing us, I know our time's running out here, but it's about rigor, and it's about how to talk about rigor in the classroom. So again, Sherry St. Clair, Coaching Redefined. It's pretty easy to find, and that's a new favorite of mine. And thanks for typing that in, Amy, for us. All right, thank you.
Thank you. And we are now at 2 o'clock. It looks like we got some really great other suggestions from folks around resources, which we really appreciate you putting into the chat. This does bring us to the end of our think tank. This last slide does have information, areas where you can access for technical questions and policy questions. And then also the website that is being updated with information about COVID-19 as it becomes available. But before we actually sign off, I wanted to turn over to Amy and/or Gay for any last well wishes for the group.
Thank you, James. Gay, did you want to chime in here?
I've been chiming in the chat, but in case you haven't didn't have that part opened, our topic for next month is around having difficult conversations with coaching a teacher. So based on Jennifer Abrams' work, as well as a couple others in the field. So May the 29th at 1 o'clock for an hour, we'll be talking about having difficult conversations.